So come up with me to the mountain, won't you? Jesus seems to have a certain affinity for mountains. Have you noticed? We just finished a whole month worth of listening to Jesus talk from the Mount in the Sermon on the Mount, in the greatest sermon ever preached. And now we find Jesus again on a mountain with his disciples. I wonder if only these three disciples, James, Peter, and his brother John, were invited. I wonder if the other disciples, the other friends of Jesus who waited at the foot of the mountain, if they said, well, you know, Jesus, boy, my feet hurt. We just walked a long way to get here. I slept poorly last night, so I'm going to pass up this trip up the mountain, Jesus, if it's all right with you. I wonder how many people pass up the opportunity to go up the mountain with Jesus. And I wonder if Jesus knew, as he's worked his way up the mountain, what was about to happen. That the glory of his godness would be displayed. I wonder what Jesus' mood was that day. Do you think Jesus ever suffered from depression? Think about his life. Think about what it was to go through your life knowing that your life was going to end in a horrible death. It was just a matter of time. Think about his life. No home, no job, no family. He left his family. That would be enough to put the strongest faith to the test, don't you think? So this is a good day, Jesus probably thought. This is as good a day as any to go up to the mountain, to be with my Father. Anyone else feel like coming along? Anyone else wondering what this life is all about, what our purpose is, what in the world we are supposed to be doing, and why we're doing it? Have you ever wondered that? Have you ever wondered, well, what's the point, really? Why am I here? What am I supposed to be doing? And Jesus says, well, come up the mountain with me. Think about the disciples who stayed at the foot of the mountain. Think about the disciples who refused the invitation. Think about what they missed that day. Maybe they were depressed too. Maybe they just couldn't get up off of their rock. They just wanted to sit down and put their feet up and rest. Now you go. Well, all they missed by not going up the mountain that day was the sight of God revealed in the glory of Jesus Christ. And isn't that so much like life? Sometimes it takes everything in our power to get up just out of bed, much less to go climb a mountain. Maybe one reason Jesus spent so much time climbing mountains was that he knew it would be a picture that you and I could relate to. I don't know what mountains you face this week. I know what some of you face. I know what Peggy faces. I know what Andre faces and Chad. I know what Donna Heck's family is going to be going through. I know what it's going to be like for all those people that we just prayed for. And all of you who have mountains this week that you haven't told me about. I invite you to tell me about the mountains that you have in your communication card, or give me a call. You know what we just talked about with Angela, how important it is to communicate, because how else will the church, how else will Jesus be able to reach out and touch you? You don't have to go up the mountain alone. Jesus even didn't go up the mountain alone. Well, we can't know exactly what happened that day, can we? We just get this really sparing detail of what happened. But something happened. Something happened to the appearance of Jesus to let his disciples know that Jesus was different than them. That Jesus was this human being who they saw, and we're going to talk about in Lent. We're going to talk about all the different ways that Jesus is like us. Jesus eats, Jesus drinks, Jesus rests, Jesus dines. We're going to talk all about those ways that Jesus is like us. And I invite you to walk the Lenten journey with us as we go through that. But we're going to also see today, on this last Sunday of the Epiphany, of the unveiling of Jesus Christ, on this last Sunday before we take that long walk to Good Friday and Easter morning, we're going to see Jesus revealed not only as a human being, but as God as well. And so he's transfigured, not into something he was not. The word is metamorphosis, but it's not like changing into something different. Jesus isn't changing into some other creature. Jesus is just being revealed as who he is, God. And so his face shines, his clothes are white, shining white, and then Elijah and Moses, long since dead, now alive in some form, are talking to Jesus. Why in the world didn't the Bible writers tell us what they talked about? Wouldn't that have been a really interesting conversation to eavesdrop on? Elijah representing the prophets, Moses representing the law, and Jesus representing the fulfillment of the law and the prophets as grace. But we don't know, probably because we don't need to know, because that's not the point. The point of the story is that Jesus was there with the law and the prophets, with Moses and Elijah, with these two friends. Well, maybe the disciples couldn't even understand what they were talking about. Maybe there's some heavenly universal language. Maybe we don't all talk different languages in heaven. Maybe after we get our glorified bodies and our glorified brains and our glorified tongues and teeth, maybe we all talk some heavenly language that they couldn't understand, but Jesus understood. But they keep on talking. And then another thing about this story that attracts me is that the light did not drive them away. You think about that, right? Think about these three men. There they are. And they see Jesus starting to shine. And they see these figures. Now, wouldn't that drive most of us down the mountain faster than we came up? But the light of Jesus is attractive. Peter even says, let me build something for you to stay in so that we can all be here. But of course, that's not the point. And then, in this moment of great glory, a cloud comes. I wonder if they feared the cloud. They were high on a mountain, Mount Hermon. And there are clouds that come along. Maybe they thought, well, this is just another cloud. Maybe they think nothing about it. Maybe, well, it's just a cloud. But there they are in this cloud, and they can barely see each other, and they cannot now see Jesus. And this most spectacular moment of their life is now enveloped in this bright cloud. And isn't that so much like life? Why can't we just stay in the amazing moment when we feel higher than we've ever felt? When we feel like we are on top of the world, when we feel like we've got it. This is what life is supposed to be. This is what God intended for me. When we feel like we have achieved this moment, a cloud comes. When that cloud comes upon us, what do? Do we fear? Do we fear or do we listen? Or is what we hear what causes us to fear? That's what happened, of course. They heard this voice of God that comes from out of the cloud. A voice which speaks a language that the three of them understands. And there's something about that voice. There's something about that voice which is unmistakably the voice of God. And I want you to think with me about why that voice spoke. I want you to think with me for a moment about who exactly that voice was for. You see, if God is talking, if God is saying, this is my son, my beloved, the one I love. With him I am well pleased. All of that part. Do you think maybe it was for Jesus? These are the very same words that Jesus heard at his baptism. As Jesus rose from the water, you remember the story, right? Jesus rises from the water in the arms of John the baptizer, and he hears the heavens open up, the dove descends, and the voice of God splitting it, something like thunder. This is my Son in whom I am well pleased. And now that same message comes back. I wonder if as Jesus was getting ready to walk to the cross, it was Jesus who needed to hear, "You are my beloved." And if Jesus needs to hear that God loves him, how about you? Is it too much to ask that God would say so that you can hear he loves you? Would you like to hear that? Would you like to hear that? Okay. You are God's son. You are God's daughter. You are God's beloved by adoption. But Jesus by his nature. And so God says of your brother, "This is my son." But who else needed to hear it? The three men, right? The three men who are now face down in the ground. And they hear the last part of what God says, the last part of what the voice says. Listen to him. It echoes back to Deuteronomy 18, where God is saying to Moses, to the people, listen to Moses, listen to him. And so he is saying to them, and he's saying to you and me today, listen to this person, God. But now I want us to think about this cloud out of which the voice comes. Because it's one thing to hear it in a bright cloud. In a cloud, well, yes, I'm in a cloud, but it's a bright cloud. And the voice of God is affirming, and the voice of God is lifting me up, and the voice of God is giving me great hope on this beautiful, bright cloud. But what if that's the cloud? Fast forward with me, won't you? Fast forward with me to Good Friday. And as we go along from here until Good Friday and to Easter, think about this day. Think about what Jesus heard this day from the bright cloud to the darkness. Think about what it means to hear on the cross, to recall as Jesus recalls, "This is my Son whom I love, with him I am well pleased," as Jesus is there not in clothes made of white, but as he is there on the cross, naked, with soldiers gambling for his clothes. That too is the Son with whom he is well pleased. Think about what it means for Jesus to hear, "This is my Son with whom I am well pleased, my beloved." Think about what that means on this Transfiguration Day, and then again what it will mean for Jesus when he is at the cross. Because you can't understand one without the other. The glory of Transfiguration Day makes no sense unless the voice that comes from out of the cloud also comes in the dark clouds. Because that's life, isn't it? That's life, isn't it? Think about Andre and his family. What a dark cloud. And they long to hear that God is saying, "My beloved," to that family. Think about the people who will have surgery this week, Marge and Peggy. They will be in a dark cloud, right? But somehow through you, through Pastor Phil, through our elders, through each of you, they need to hear, "You are beloved." And so God comes to us in the bright clouds. God comes to us in the dark clouds, and he says, listen to him. For it is at the cross where we will hear on Good Friday that it isn't Jesus, it isn't God who says, listen to him. It isn't God who says, this is my son. It is the soldier who sits there, the enemy of God, the enemy of Christ, who says, surely this is the Son of God. The voices might sound different. The voices might come in different ways out of the darkness than they do out of the light. But listen to him. And so we see then this surprising thing. The cloud goes away. And the three men look up, and who do they see? No Elijah, no Moses, no God other than Jesus. And then this marvelous thing happens. This most marvelous thing happens. God has just said, listen to him. And what does Jesus say? Get up. Don't be afraid. Jesus says at the very end of our text, don't you tell anyone about this until what? Until after I have risen from the dead. Jesus knew at that moment he was going to die, but he knew he was going to rise. And he knows you will rise. He knows this day, in whatever the depression is that you're in whatever mental illness you suffer from or your loved ones suffer from, whatever physical disability you have, Jesus will one day say to you, get up. Do not be afraid. You see, the voice of God comes and it frightens. But the presence of God in the person of Jesus Christ invites. He invites each of you to come, to get up. He invites each of you to do not be afraid. He says, will you come to this table? Jesus says, look, I have here a cup for you. Look, I have here bread for you. And it's nothing magical that's going to happen to it, but here's what I want you to do. I want you to take a piece of bread, and I want you to take it back with you to your pew, and I want you to take a cup of juice with you and take it back to your pew. The elders are going to bring it to you. You wait right there. They're going to bring it to you. And you get it, and I want you to hold on to the bread, and I want you to hold on to the cup. And there's nothing magical about it. It's just bread. It's just juice. But I want you to imagine, I want you to know that mysteriously Jesus Christ is in the cup. Jesus Christ's body is in the bread, and you're going to hold it. That's as much of the glory of God as we can hold. But it's going to be for you.